The Nazis' short but cataclysmic rise to power shook the world. In less than a decade, ruthless violence and a hate-fueled ideology pushed the Third Reich to the brink of global domination and Europe to absolute destruction. Propelling Hitler's unstoppable war machine were some of the most evil scientists and brilliant minds the world had ever seen. From groundbreaking missile technology to devastating human experimentation, these elite scientists unleashed never-before-seen carnage in the name of a racist ideology hell-bent on reshaping civilization. Now, we unearth the secret science behind the Nazis' terrifying war effort and shed light on the innovation, coercion, and fundamental horror at the heart of their immoral inventions. How did it happen? And how much, if any, of this warped history remains with us today? September 1934. Thousands of cheering Nazi supporters gather in the Zeppelinfeld in Nuremberg, Germany. They are surrounded by 152 anti-aircraft searchlights beaming into the sky. These lights aren't just for show. They represent the walls of what would be the largest stadium in the world, a monstrous building that would soon dominate the Nuremberg landscape. This is the beginning of Adolf Hitler's empire, one constructed by some of the world's most innovative engineers and architects. These grand designs will be the future of Germany, a country that only a decade earlier lay in ruins.
Germany was in disarray after World War I, politically, socially, economically, and culturally. You have the German Revolution that replaces the Kaiser and the monarchy with a republic, but you also have street fighting between communist forces and far-right proto-fascist forces, and there's a lot of revolutionary sentiment, both from the right and from the left.
The country also is broke. They have signed the Treaty of Versailles. Most of the country is really upset with the terms, and the German government is forced to start making reparations payments to the Allies.
Those reparations have to be paid in hard currency, and once Germany's gold stores were depleted, it was using Reichsmarks to buy foreign currency that could be used to make those payments.
By November 1923, $1 US is equal to 1 trillion marks, and the unemployment rate is at nearly 30%.
The average German person during the Weimar Republic period is really suffering. They cannot make ends meet, and they're looking for a scapegoat at this point.
And this is when the Nazi Party really starts to see an increase in support.
It's in the midst of this economic devastation that the Nazi Party begins holding annual rallies in the quiet medieval town of Nuremberg.
Nuremberg is a site that was important in the Holy Roman Empire, the so-called First Reich, that Hitler is making a direct connection to by calling his vision of Germany the Third Reich. So it's a symbolically rich site. It's also in the heart of Nazi country, with lots of support from the population.
The rallies grow in size year after year, leading to the building of a specially designed 11 square kilometer site in 1933. The year of Hitler's appointment as chancellor.
They want people to be able to come to see Hitler, to be captivated within that moment, to be around hundreds of thousands of other cheering Nazi supporters. That idea really serves their ultimate goal of fealty to the Fuhrer.
When you have a large group of people that are gathered together, if you can get them doing activities at the same time, they get into sync with each other. In neuroscience, the thought is that your brains are starting to sync up the circuits, and the rhythmic waves that are going through are matching the people around you. And then if you've got a message that enforces them as a group supporting the nation, people are going to start thinking more about themselves as that group and as that nation than as individuals.
The enormous ornate rallies reached their peak in 1934, and are immortalized in Leni Riefenstahl's infamous film Triumph of the Will.
It's a beautifully crafted movie, of course, but it's also terrifying. And the most terrifying aspect of it, as far as I'm concerned, is the sheer number of people involved and this sort of maniacal love that they have for what is happening.
During this rally, 700,000 people descend on the grounds to celebrate Hitler's victory.
What you see when you look at footage of the Nazi Party rally grounds in Nuremberg is already huge and imposing and frankly monstrous. But the vision for what it would have become was even more so.
Hitler dreams of a new complex, one where the crowds won't be limited to hundreds of thousands, but millions. And there's only one man fit to oversee such a project: Albert Speer.
Albert Speer is one of the most important members of the Nazi hierarchy. Born into a wealthy family, he pursues a career as an architect. And in 1931, he joins the Nazi Party.
Albert Speer brought to the Nazis an air of culture and refinement. A lot of Nazis were failures, thugs, weirdos. They were resentful, bitter, insecure. Speer was the opposite of that. And he brought that sense of respectability and cachet to the Nazis.
Shortly after he joins the Nazi Party, he comes to the attention of Joseph Goebbels. Goebbels commissions him to rebuild the Nazi Party headquarters in Berlin.
After successfully completing that project, Speer is introduced to Hitler in 1933, rapidly becoming part of his inner circle and taking on new jobs for the Chancellor.
He's able to cultivate a very close relationship with Hitler, and in many aspects, this comes from their shared love of art. Hitler is a failed artist. He would have seen Albert Speer as something of a kindred spirit. So they would spend much time together going over drawings and working together on all these new fantastical Nazi buildings that Hitler wanted commissioned.
By 1934, Speer has effectively become the Nazi Party's chief architect and begins construction on the Zeppelinfeld at the Nuremberg rally grounds. Featured prominently in Triumph of the Will, the stadium holds 340,000 people and includes a 360-meter-long grandstand based on the Pergamon altar built in Asia Minor during the reign of the ancient Greek king Eumenes II in the 2nd century BC. But Hitler has even bigger plans. Together, he and Albert Speer will build a new Germany, beginning with the expansion of the Nuremberg rally grounds.
The idea was to transform Nuremberg as this center of Nazi ideology and culture, where people could essentially come as a pilgrimage to worship at the feet of Hitler. And so it's so important for Speer to get this right for Hitler, because it's a key part of the Nazi propaganda machine.
Elaborate military displays would take place on the enormous new grounds. Hitler Youth members would compete in their own dedicated arena in the shadow of the Deutschstadion, the largest sports stadium in the world, with 19-meter-high walls built out of pink granite.
These built structures being bigger and better than other places fits into this idea that Germanic culture is better than everybody else. The buildings are physical representations of German superiority.
The Deutschstadion was modeled after the ancient Panathenaic Stadium in Athens. These references to the ancient past would appear constantly throughout Hitler and Speer's designs.
When you look at the architecture, it immediately screams of classical architecture. It's the sort of things you would expect to see in Greece or the Roman Empire.
The Nazis claim that all great ancient civilizations were actually founded by the Aryans, this mythical, supposed ancient race that is the sole source of cultural flourishing. And they could say, well, Greece and Rome were products of the Aryans, but today they've been weakened through intermixing and racial mixing, and they've become degenerate, and the only place where the Aryan race remained pure was in the Nordic cultures.
The Greeks and the Romans were great, expansive cultures that went out and colonized and dominated other groups of people. With the structures that Hitler once built, he could reflect back to his population that Germany fit within those same powerful and wealthy and great traditions.
This neoclassical style is universally recognized as an imperial style. And so it shows a really distinct lack of imagination, which Hitler was known for. This is why he didn't get into art school. He can't even imagine what a 20th century imperial architecture should look like.
To Hitler, the Roman Empire was defined by innovation and an ability to merge function and beauty.
Right from the pyramids until the 20th century was all about construction. Architecture was the advance that defined our world. And the Romans actually loved that architecture thing. They built things to last.
While many more modern buildings are crumbling from age, some ancient Roman structures, like the world-famous Pantheon in Rome, are still standing, thanks to some innovative building techniques.
You're going to have materials like concrete. As moisture goes in, and air will have sulfur, chlorine, acid rains, pollutions, all these are going to go react with this concrete material. The reaction is going to degrade it. The innovation is, can it not degrade? And the brilliance is, instead of not degrading, can it actually strengthen?
Though concrete had already been in use for millennia, Roman concrete used an improved method, adding materials like quicklime, volcanic ash, and seawater to the mixture.
Things like this really help so that it, instead of degrading, it actually formed a chemical reaction to stabilize the system and make it stronger and more effective.
The Romans used this concrete for hundreds of years, but it required a long setting time, so builders eventually moved on to more practical, though less resilient methods. And the exact recipe for Roman concrete was lost to time. Hitler is determined to build a nation just as innovative and just as advanced as that of the ancient Romans. Few of Hitler's plans represent Germany's advanced technology and design more than the Tempelhof Airport.
Hitler's vision that Berlin should have this grand international airport and be the seat of aviation was really central to the vision for Tempelhof. And it's central to Nazi propaganda in general. The idea that we're going to master the sky, we're taking things to this final frontier.
Tempelhof Airport opened in 1923, and by the time Hitler is appointed chancellor a decade later, it's already a bustling center for the rapidly expanding business of commercial air travel.
Aviation is very new and exotic and wonderful in the imagination of people, but a lot of people aren't quite ready to take that step, that leap of faith, if you will, until the 20s and into the 30s when, okay, people are going up and they're coming back down and everything seems to be fine. So that's really when commercial airlines are able to start to exploit possibilities.
But the land's history extends much further back than the invention of the airplane. In fact, the grounds at Tempelhof have a history that goes back centuries to one of the most powerful organizations in religious history.
That section of Berlin was and is called Tempelhof, and that name, the Temple Courtyard, dates back to the Knights Templar in medieval Europe, and it was a place where they kind of set up a court. The Knights Templar was a military order founded for the Crusades. It also had a vast international economic network.
Then, in the early 18th century, the grounds are taken over by the Prussian army, who use it as a parade ground until the onset of the First World War. And by the end of the 19th century, Tempelhof Field has already become an important aviation hub. Balloonists begin using the land to test hot air balloons. Then, in 1909, 6 years after conducting man's first powered flight, Orville Wright of the Wright brothers flies one of his aircraft over Tempelhof. With such a storied history, it's no surprise that Hitler considers Tempelhof a prime candidate for expansion and a place for him to leave his mark.
So it's incredibly important for Hitler that the first thing that people encounter when they arrive in Germany is something that's modern, overwhelming, and impressive.
Under Speer's supervision, the old Tempelhof terminal is replaced with a new, larger, sleeker version. The building's limestone facade extends along the whole 1.2-kilometer long quadrant. The adjoining buildings are designed to resemble a flying eagle. A 1.6-kilometer hangar roof is designed in tiers to form a stadium for the German public to watch air and ground demonstrations. The scale of the project is enormous.
If you are landing in Germany and this is the airport, my goodness, what else is there out in Germany? It makes an impression, and that's exactly the point of having such a thing.
As elaborate as Hitler's plans are for Nuremberg and Tempelhof, they pale in comparison to the designs for the nation's capital.
Albert Speer drew up plans to completely reform and remake Berlin into the world capital Germania.
He sees it as the central heartbeat of an empire, much in the way of Roman emperors like a Trajan.
The world capital of Germania would have shown you that you're dealing with the people who founded all of the cultural greatness in the world.
The design for the new city incorporates several enormous monuments and buildings, but the most formidable by far would be the People's Hall, or Volkshalle.
And the Volk is a central concept to Nazism. Volk can have a range of meanings, but in the Nazi concept, it speaks to this organic idea of a people, that a nation or a race is an organic and biological reality.
The term Volk has its roots in the Volkisch movement of the late 19th century. The Volkisch idea of a perfect population is completely uniform. The people or blood must be tied to a particular land or soil. The idea of blood and soil excludes any outsiders from being accepted into the movement. Nicknamed the Monster Bau, or Monster Building, this monument would be the crown jewel of Berlin.
There's no practical purpose to it, but having such a large structure is representative of the possibility of the party, what they can accomplish, and is representative of the grandeur that they see in themselves.
Inspired by the Pantheon, built by the Roman Emperor Hadrian, the Volkshalle would be massive at over 99,000 square meters and over 87 stories tall. Inside, the Volkshalle would bear a striking resemblance to the Pantheon. Gold mosaic would surround a 24-meter-high eagle statue. Underneath the sculpture would rest Hitler's tribunal, from which he could address crowds of adoring, cheering Germans.
The Volkshalle will be able to seat 180,000 people and has this massive dome. It will be the largest dome in the world.
Domes were always the marvel of architecture, because when you apply a force in a sharp corner, it doesn't have anywhere to go. It reacts to the force and breaks. What a dome does is, because of the spherical nature of it, it doesn't have sharp corners or anything. In a dome, when you apply force, it spreads through the whole thing. So therefore, domes gives you the best reaction to any external force. So it will help you maintain stability even under adverse circumstances.
At the time, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome was the tallest domed building in the world, reaching 136 meters at the top of the cross. The Volkshalle's 250-meter diameter dome would soar to 220 meters high and would be adorned with a turret and eagle, bringing it to 290 meters in total.
It's so big, the whole building of St. Peter's could have actually fit within the dome of the Volkshalle.
But the other element, too, is what is going to be destroyed in order to make this happen.
In order to go about creating this built culture that they want, they have to destroy something that was already there that arguably is more reflective of the true German culture, the true German people.
They want to remake it so that all those aspects of the city that they hate, the working class, the Jewish neighborhoods, the streets that they see as corrupted, those are all gone, and in their place, these new structures that are really emblematic of the greatness of this new 1,000-year Reich.
In 1938, demolition crews begin erasing the old Berlin. Residents in the Alsen and Tiergarten districts are swiftly evicted from their properties and resettled in houses formerly owned by Jewish families.
So Speer, right from the beginning, is well and truly involved in the Holocaust, because this plan to remodel Berlin relies on Jews that have been forced out of their homes and have been deported somewhere.
These Jewish families are no longer allowed in many parts of the capital. Some have disappeared completely, taken to unknown locations far from the city. The demolition work quickly makes way for one of Hitler's first major building projects, an arch. Like a dome, an arch provides strength by distributing force across the arch. But that is not Hitler and Speer's concern here.
Shortly after the fall of France, one of the few tours that Hitler does outside of German territory is actually to Paris. Speer is with him, and they're looking at the Arc de Triomphe, and they decide they want to build their own in Berlin. But it's going to be way bigger than the one that's in Paris. Way bigger, of course.
Standing 3 times larger than Paris's Arc de Triomphe, it will bear the names of 1.8 million German soldiers killed during the First World War.
Arches are meant to symbolize rebirth and growth. That's why they're used in a lot of memorial structures. It's a way for people to come through to the other side and to heal.
This monument will be one of the most important in the city. That is, if it can stand.
One of the only examples that are left of this attempt to build Germania is this 16,000-ton cylinder that sits in the ground.
If we're going to build this massive grand structure, my geological research is the first thing. Clay is this much, sand is this much, granite is this much, therefore compositely this ground can hold that much. It depends on where you are. I mean, New York City, Manhattan is filled with skyscrapers because the whole island is a granite slab. It can hold that weight and it won't sink.
But Berlin doesn't have the geological advantages of Manhattan.
Berlin is built on marshes and swamps, so Speer had to test the ground to see if it could actually support the biggest and most imposing buildings known to humanity. So the way to do that is to build this heavy cylinder. It's called the Schwerbelastungskörper.
The foundation for the Schwerbelastungskörper is 11 meters in diameter and extends 18 meters into the ground. The cylinder itself will reach 14 meters into the sky, costing an estimated 400,000 Reichsmarks, $1.8 million today.
The cylinder was designed such that they could see how far it sunk into the ground. If it sunk more than 6 centimeters into the ground, that meant the land that they wanted to build on was not suitable.
The cylinder is completed in 1942, but only time would tell if it was a success. In order to fully bring his nationwide renovations to life, Hitler will need a strong workforce.
Nazi Germany was guided by the concept of Gleichschaltung, coordination. Everything was linked and coordinated to the Nazi party, one people, one Reich, one Führer. So the Nazis essentially Nazify the labor movement.
On May 1st, 1933, Hitler gathers a crowd at the field near Tempelhof Airport and celebrates May Day, Labor Day, for the German workers. A day later, he launches the German Labor Front, headed by Robert Lai.
Lai is a prominent NDSAP organizer and a former member of the Reichstag, Germany's parliament. With his newfound power as head of the German Labor Front, or DAF, he is determined to reinvent the German workforce.
The Nazis are going to implement what is called Kraft durch Freude, which is Strength Through Joy program, as well as the Beauty of Labor program.
Formed in 1934, the Beauty of Labor program promises better and more comfortable working conditions for Germans across the nation.
Workers have better lighting, they have nicer cafeterias, they have access to green space at their place of labor.
By 1935, over 12,000 plants have been renovated, adding recreation areas and modern bathrooms, and work uniforms are upgraded.
There's a whole field of neuroarchitecture that says that you can have a building having better lighting, brighter spaces, prettier spaces that people feel much happier and more comfortable in, and productivity goes up with it.
But the improvements for working class Germans aren't limited to the workplace.
Strike Through Joy aimed to make certain goods and experiences accessible and available to the working classes. And this included eventually being able to purchase their own vehicle and also access to types of leisure they previously wouldn't have been able to afford.
Government-subsidized sports lessons are provided, and cultural events become more accessible.
The KDF organized what we would consider to be all-inclusive holidays.
Throughout the 1930s, millions of Germans go on Nazi-organized cruises. The voyages quickly become Strength Through Joy's flagship program. Their success sparks an even larger project.
One thing that Hitler wanted to do was create the biggest beach resort in the history of the world.
Resting along the Baltic Sea's Pomeranian coast, Rügen is Germany's largest island and already a popular tourist destination. It's here that Hitler wants to open a sprawling beach resort, large enough to hold 20,000 visitors. Work begins in 1936, with a total of 9,000 workers hired to bring Hitler's vision to life.
The Nazi leadership wanted to impress the world with Germany's natural beauty, which has been long a part of German nationalist thought and self-conception. The idea being that nature is fundamental to what creates each individual people as its own distinct thing.
During this time, Germany's rebirth attracts visitors from all around the world. By 1937, up to 500,000 Americans make the trip across the Atlantic each year. But those visitors won't be staying at Hitler's resort. Construction is stopped with the start of the war, and having already spent 237.5 million Reichsmarks, more than $2 billion today, the resort is never completed. To the tourists visiting Germany, it seems to be idyllic, but beneath the surface, things are far darker.
The Nazis' presentation of themselves as a party that stood for workers' rights is a bunch of smoke and mirrors.
Just 2 months after Hitler's appointment as Chancellor, trade union offices across Germany begin to suffer attacks. The SA, the Nazis' earliest paramilitary wing, is breaking into buildings, stealing documents, beating, and in some cases murdering union members. Hitler orders wages to be capped. Overtime is now the only way for a working-class German to improve their earnings.
Workers' rights and workers' welfare are only important to Hitler insofar as it keeps people pacified and it reduces the threat of revolution based on working-class solidarity or ideology.
Predictably, the luxury travel opportunities offered to working-class Germans are far from what they seem.
Many of the resorts weren't especially nice, and those KDF trips were very regimented, and this led to a lot of disappointments.
And yet the Strength Through Joy program continues to appear to be a success. By 1938, conditions in over 34,000 workplaces have been improved.
But in doing so, they're also able to distract from the total control that the state is taking over workplaces. It's done through these small little steps that allow for more and more encroachment of the state into workspaces and into the work lives of ordinary Germans.
With this seemingly reinvigorated workforce, Hitler continues to plan the future of German cities, now outside the country's borders.
Hitler wasn't from Germany. Hitler was from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And Hitler's experience of a state like that, a state of many nationalities, of many peoples, of many languages, really shaped his ideas for what Germany should be under his leadership.
Germany and Austria have a long shared history, going back to ancient Bavaria. Much of the Austrian population is ethnically German, and most Austrians speak German. But despite that, in 1871, Austria is excluded from German unification.
Hitler thought that it was unfair that the ethnic Germans in Austria should be forced to live in a state with these inferior peoples, Slavs, Jews, others. He thinks Germany and Austria should unite, but one of the terms of the treaties that ended World War I is that Austria could never unite with Germany.
Hitler's determination to take back Austria lies in his relationship to one city, his hometown of Linz.
During the Third Reich, Linz takes on this kind of mythical quality because of its association to Hitler as his boyhood town. And people make pilgrimages to Linz. It's a very popular tourist destination.
Amid threats of invasion, Austria allows itself to be annexed by Germany in March of 1938. And Hitler vows to invest significant amounts of money into developing Linz into an unrivaled cultural epicenter.
He views himself as the center of a new German empire, so having where he grew up be the cultural center to that really fits in perfectly with his overall vision for what the empire is going to be.
Hitler planned a cultural museum in Linz, which would have rivaled the British Museum. And he saw it as a place to bring all of the looted and stolen artwork from all over conquered territories and exhibit them in a place that was close to his heart. The Nazis really wanted to use culture to inculcate ideology and to shape a sense of history and a sense of belonging and a sense of destiny for the future.
By gaining control of Austria, Hitler has officially launched his new German empire. The Third Reich is now a reality.
There is a lot of hope around Europe that Hitler will stop once he's satisfied himself with Austria. But there are a lot of skeptics out there who know that these are red flags, that this is just a beginning to a terrible, terrible chapter in human history.
As Albert Speer builds Hitler's new German empire, a different kind of structure has begun appearing across the Reich. Enormous complexes spring up on the outskirts of cities like Munich, Hamburg, and Weimar. They are massive sites lined with barracks and surrounded by barbed wire. These new compounds are a far cry from the plans unfolding in Nuremberg and Berlin, though they will soon be far more infamous. In May 1938, a facility opens in Flossenburg. Groups of men dressed in identical striped uniforms work to excavate granite for Nazis' lavish architecture.
Despite all the German rhetoric about the German worker, a lot of the hard work is done by forced laborers and slave laborers in concentration and labor camps.
When you look at Hitler's affinity for Roman and Greek culture, those were also societies that relied heavily on slave labor. He is leaning into those cultural traditions that he is founding his German empire on.
Hitler's really taking that to a whole other level. And that's because, just like everything else, the Nazis were interested in doing things in a totalizing way. Total solutions, total transformations, total remaking of society.
As the Nazis embark on a genocide, the likes of which the world has never seen, their labor and death camps will become crucial to the future of Hitler's empire building. The earliest concentration camps date back long before the beginning of the Second World War, starting with Dachau, opened in 1933.
Concentration camps were a way to take opposition, they were a way to take undesirables away from society and house them together, use them as forced labor.
Located just 20 kilometers outside of Munich, Dachau quickly becomes the template for the Nazis' concentration camp labor, as arrests increased dramatically.
This was happening on a large scale and in a very short amount of time. You're taking a society where the Jewish minority is assimilated. German Jews feel German to a very large extent and are very patriotic. And within the span of a couple years, you're creating a situation where a system of using them and other supposed undesirables as forced labor becomes ever present at every level of society throughout the German Empire.
By the end of 1937, almost 8,000 people are imprisoned by the Nazi Party. By the middle of 1939, this number has more than tripled and is mostly spread over 7 large camps, including Mauthausen, mere kilometers from Hitler's hometown of Linz.
Major chemical companies, major engineering companies, major auto companies, they all used slave labor provided to them by the Nazi government, and it was impossible, as a German, living in any German city or town, not to know that. You were well aware that forced labor was happening and it was sustaining the world around you.
On September 1st, 1939, the Nazis invade Poland in a rapid, ruthless assault. Hitler is now free to expand his forced labor system into new territory.
The whole idea is not only to conquer territory that can then be resettled with Germans, but also part of this imperial mission is to have access to cheap labor.
In May of 1940, the first prisoners arrive at the Auschwitz concentration camp outside of Krakow. At the entrance of Auschwitz and many of the other concentration camps stands a sign that translates into "Work will set you free." The line suggests to many that cooperative prisoners may someday be allowed to leave their prison. This is a lie. The Nazis' labor camps are built to work their inmates to death.
For Speer and Hitler to realize their vision of this new world capital, they were going to lean heavily on slave labor to build these huge buildings.
In April of 1938, the SS founds a new company, German Earth and Stone Works, or DEST. DEST has one responsibility: to source building materials for state construction projects, including Albert Speer's monumental architecture. By 1941, DEST is operating out of 7 concentration camps, all in the proximity of brickworks or stone quarries. But as the war rages across Europe, the Nazis depend more and more on forced labor, not to build an empire, but to build armaments.
In 1942, Albert Speer is appointed armaments minister. It's a very important role. Speer is now responsible for keeping the German war machine moving, and he is incredibly effective and ruthless at that. And a large part of his ability to keep the German war machine moving is the use of slave laborers.
By 1944, slave labor makes up 1/4 of Germany's entire workforce. But despite the Nazis' massive supply of slave labor, Hitler's dreams of a new Germany are dying.
The Nazis are so confident in victory that they are not going to wait until the war is won to build all these new great architectural marvels, that they're actually going to do it simultaneously. So we're going to build these buildings that will last for 1,000 years. We're going to exterminate these people that we don't like as we're trying to win this global conflict.
This is not sustainable, and by 1945, Germany is in ruins, and the cost of the war has leveled the German economy. The war has left most of Hitler and Speer's construction plans in shambles. In Linz, Hitler's Grand Museum is never completed. In Nuremberg, many of the buildings are destroyed by the Allies. In Berlin, things are especially dire.
Hitler had Berlin as this grand city, the seat of government of this new empire, and by the end of the war, it is unrecognizable. It's been invaded, it's been occupied by the Allies, the city is in ruins.
The Battle for Berlin involves street fighting where houses, apartments, streets have just been demolished from this fighting. And it remains a pile of rubble for many years after the war.
And there's a symbolic power there, that you have the model and the vision of Nazism will remake the world and last 1,000 years, and this is the testament to it, and these will be the temples to it. And in reality, it was crushed, and the city where it was supposed to be built was crushed.
But Speer and Hitler do succeed in leaving behind a remnant of their grand plans, the monstrous cylinder designed to test the ground in Berlin.
The Schwerbelastungskörper doesn't have any purpose other than to be a big heavy cylinder. Put it up and see if the ground can support it. And sure enough, it can't.
The cylinder ended up sinking something like 20 centimeters into the ground. So what it showed is that all these ridiculous ideas that Speer and Hitler had to rebuild Berlin were doomed to fail.
The marshy ground just actually can't sustain it, can't hold it up. And isn't that really representative of the entire Nazi ideology?
Germany, I'm sure, would like to have this memorial to Hitler's grandiose moved, but they can't. If they were to blow it up, it would damage the apartment buildings all around it. So it's there, you can go see it, and there's information there about Speer and Hitler's shared vision that never came to be for this monumental remaking of Berlin.
After the war, the Allies round up the senior members of the Nazi elite who are still left standing.
Robert Lai, the man who led the oppression of German workers during Hitler's regime, remained loyal to the Nazis until the very end of the war. After years of corruption at the highest levels of the German labor front, Lai is captured by American troops in spring of 1945. 3 days after his indictment, he hangs himself in his cell. Despite his instrumental role in the Nazis' rule over Germany, Albert Speer faces a far less ominous end.
After the war, Speer does what very few Nazis were able to do, and he manages through lies and distortion to kind of redeem himself.
Speer begins supplying the Allies with information as soon as the war ends in May of 1945. In September, he's arrested and tried at Nuremberg in 1946.
Speer is very useful to the Allies at the Nuremberg war crimes trials because he's willing to take responsibility, not personal responsibility. He's willing to say, I didn't know what happened, but I should have. And he's willing to invoke a kind of collective responsibility. He's also willing to point the finger.
Albert Speer is going to turn on the Nazis, reveal a lot about the inner workings of the Nazi Party in order to present himself as a good Nazi, or as someone who was not so ideologically committed that he was engaged in crimes against humanity.
Speer is found guilty, but rather than death, he's sentenced to 20 years in prison and released in 1966.
And he has this remarkably successful career once he's released. Publishes a book, gets speaking gigs all the time, and really is able to refashion himself.
Speer in many ways gives average Nazis an alibi, an excuse that they can point to him and say, well, look, if Speer, this right-hand man of Hitler, didn't know what was going on, how the heck did I know what was going on?
Well, it's not true. Speer was not only aware of what was going on, he was an active participant in it. Documents exist showing Speer's direct responsibility for deporting Jews from the German capital, knowing where they were going and what was going to happen to them. Speer's direct use of slave labor from concentration camps to build the V-2 rocket, to work on building a huge U-boat bunker in the north of Germany.
He also was well aware that the final solution was taking place, and in actual fact, he is in attendance when a meeting happens when they are discussing the installation of gas chambers and crematorium in Auschwitz. He knew what was happening. He's complicit in the crimes.
He was willing to contribute to and participate in the mass murder and the genocide of Jews because it furthered his architectural ambitions and also was in line with his ideology and beliefs. He was one of the worst perpetrators at the very top.
After a lifetime of denial, Albert Speer dies in London in 1981, between two television appearances. Adolf Hitler's failed attempt to create a new 1,000-year Reich, one that would rival the Roman Empire, left behind an unprecedented trail of death and destruction. By the end of the war, the Nazis and their collaborators had murdered an estimated 18.8 million people in the name of Hitler's crumbling regime. Today, the last vestiges of Albert Speer's work for the Führer remain, acting as a permanent testament to the German leader's ego and inhumanity.